Hello, hello. So I'm just going to be doing a couple things to just do some checks and things. I'm just going to check all of our audio and video real fast. Make sure you can see me. So just bear with me a few moments while I get that all set up. Gonna do some screen sharing. So again, it'll just take me a moment to get set up and oriented. If you're just joining us, welcome. If not, there will be a recording available, and you might actually be watching that right now. So you might be watching me do all of my checks while we're doing that. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen. The reason I'm sharing my screen is because we've got some content we're going to share that's going to look a little funny for a moment. But I will get that going here in a second. We're just going to go to full screen. There we go. And I'm just going to make sure that looks like we're live over on the website. So that's good. This is the time when I do all of the little checks to make sure that we're good to go. So, all right, we've got the slides up. I'm going to actually see if I can join the, I don't think I can actually join. You know what? That's going to be fine. So we're just going to leave it as is. I was going to join and have both my face and the slides on there. But I think we're just going to leave it like that. So since it is 1 o'clock, I am going to jump in. But first, I want to just pop back over and say hi. So hold on 1 second. Just want to bring my face back, and then I'll say hi to you all, and then I'll switch over to so stop sharing my screen. So hi and welcome. My name is Erin Blaskie, and if you found your way here, however you found your way here, I'm really excited that you are here. I'm excited that we're going to spend the next 2 hours together. I know that sounds long, but I promise there's a lot of content. I'm going to go through a lot of it, and I want to leave lots of room for questions. So I was just noticing on the Q&A portion, for some reason when I open that, it says that it's disabled. And so what we're going to do instead is I've got my email open, I've got Twitter open, I've got Facebook open. So it's Erin@erinblaskie.com is my email. Erin Blaskie is me on Twitter. So if you've got questions as you're watching this, go ahead and feel free to tweet those publicly. Tweet them or email them to me. I'm going to keep both open. I'm going to keep a good eye on both. So I will make sure that I'm paying attention. So I've got all of that open. Let me just also open Facebook in case any of you have me there. And okay, so we've got Mission Control Center in place, and I actually want to take a picture of this because it's really quite amusing. And then you can see what I've got in front of me because it's actually it's pretty funny. So just one moment, I'm going to snap a photo because in true me style that makes sense. And there. Okay, so I'm going to share that with you guys later on my social media account. So without further ado, I'm going to switch over to the slides. When it is time for the Q&A portion, I will switch back over here, and then we can have more of what feels like an intimate conversation. If I can get this Q&A thing working in the chat or in the actual app itself, I will most definitely get that going. If not, then like I said, email me, tweet me, Facebook me, whatever the case may be. Okay, let me go ahead and share my slides here, and then we're going to switch over to those. Going to make them full screen. Enter full screen. All right. And I just want to make sure, I'm just going to do one last video check before I start talking, because that would be tragic if we were having a good old time and you couldn't see the slides. Okay. Yep, so it's a little behind on the Google Hangouts, which you're not going to notice. I'm noticing because I'm watching it, but I just need to wait till that kicks in. But in the meantime, let's start. So as you know, we're going to be chatting about brand storytelling today. And the hashtag, if you do want to tweet anything live, is BYBStories. Feel free to tweet on that hashtag. You can tweet me at Erin Blaskie, or again, you can email me, erin@erinblaskie.com. Feel free to email me throughout the duration of the webinar. Again, I've got my email inbox open, I've got Twitter open, and I've got Facebook open. So if you need anything, or if there's a technical difficulty or anything like that, shoot me an email, and I'll make sure I see it. All right, so a little bit about me. If you have found your way here, there's a good chance you know a little about me, but I want to start with a story, of course. I want to start with a story. So when I was 6 years old, I was handed a Commodore 64, and my dad had given me this computer, and he basically handed me the computer and said, like, go forth and prosper, you know, like, go forth and have a lot of fun. And we did. My sister and I had a really good time with the computer. We found ourselves playing Office a lot. So we would set up a little office in our parents' living room. I was always the CEO, if that surprises you or not. So I was always the CEO, and my sister was always my secretary, and we would have this wonderful game of Office, and we would play for hours. And my dad had a red velvet lined cassette tape case holder, which I would dump out and fill with important paperwork. And when I did that, I would then carry that around the house like it was my briefcase. And it was really important, you know, that I was like, had this, and it was very important that my parents take me very seriously. So I've always had this innate desire to be a CEO, that, you know, being a business owner and having the ability to kind of create your own future and create your present and all that stuff. I really love that. And I love connecting with people, and I love the work I get to do. And so it's always been a part of my life, but it really did start when I was 6 years old. And I think for many of us, we can relate to that, at least in some way. A lot of our career callings and what we end up doing is something that we actually probably, if we were paying attention, we would have noticed very early on. So when we look at who you are, so I'm assuming that the people that are attracted to this sort of a topic, so brand storytelling, you're probably a big thinker. You probably are an idea powerhouse. I even like to say that you're likely a business adventurer. So whether you are, you know, you're in a business, you're in an organization, you own a business, you have a personal brand, you have a business brand, like whatever that looks like for you, there's still a good chance that, you know, thinking, ideas and adventures and creativity and all that stuff is still going to be a large part of that. So something I like to just let everybody know at the beginning, I'm going to talk a lot about brand storytelling in the space of it being for a business. But if you're, like I said, if you're in an organization or it's a personal brand that you're focused on, you can apply that to, you know, whatever it is that that you're sort of focused on. And all of this stuff, even if you don't own the business, is still applicable in business. So if you're working in a marketing department or you're working in a creative department, these things that I'm going to share with you today are definitely still relevant, applicable, and super helpful. So together, even if you've never considered yourself this, today we are going to consider ourselves marketers. So even if you don't resonate with that term at all, and you've never considered yourself a marketer or a salesperson or anything like that, today is the day that I'm going to crown you marketer. Because the truth of the matter is that we really all are. Whether we're in a business or not, whether we are, you know, simply just focused on our own personal stuff or not, we're still marketing. We're still crafting messages. We're still, you know, choosing how we present ourselves to the world. And the reason that that's important is because in order to do that successfully, you need to understand a little bit more about marketing. You need to understand a little bit more about emotional connection and storytelling, because all of those things come together to really weave leave an opportunity for your potential audience, whether that's customers or buyers or blog readers or simply your friends and family, getting people involved, invested, excited, and interested starts with being a marketer and understanding how that works. So our journey today is going to kind of cover multiple parts. Like I said, we have a lot of content to go through, but I am going to stop, like I said, to just check in. But so our journey today looks like this. We're going to start with ideas. And I'm going to tell you a little bit about why 8 out of 10 business ideas fail. That's a staggering statistic when you think about it, but it's true. And so we really want to hone in on why that is and why these ideas aren't getting the traction in the ground, or the space to sort of grow and become successful. Why does that happen? So we're going to look at that today. We're also going to look at intimacy. So I want to spend a little bit of time showing you how to get to know your audience a little bit better and why that's important, and understanding, who they are and how you can plot them along a launch timeline. And then, of course, that leads into resonance, which is telling the stories that matter to each group of people. So when you think about like everybody that's in your demographic, everyone that's in your potential audience, or all of your contacts, however you want to group those people, when you think about them, they are going to have different things that they resonate with. They're going to have different parts that are important. They're going to have parts that they don't really care as much about. What matters to one person will not matter to another. So just understanding how to tell the stories in a way that gets each of those people engaged and interested is also really important. And we're going to talk about that today as well. So the first place we're going to start is ideas. So ideas is one of my favorite places to start, because ideas are, and I just realized I've got the PDF open. I probably should open the Keynote, because the PDF has a couple of funny things on it. And I noticed this when I was doing this workshop at Invest Ottawa. So we're just we'll ignore the few slides that are a little bit funky. So there's a quote that says, "A good idea will keep you awake during the morning, but a great idea will keep you awake at night." And this one's also a little bit funny, but anyway, so this one says, "An idea is exhilarating." And when we think about those, the moment when we get an idea, when we think about how that happens. So oftentimes for me, most of my ideas come in the shower, which I don't know if you can resonate with that at all, but I'll get in the shower and I will be standing there washing my hair, and all of a sudden I'm like, oh my gosh, yes, this is, and an idea floods in, and I'm absolutely just, overwhelmed with this idea, and I have to jump into the shower and write it down, because if I don't, it's like the end of the world. And then oftentimes when I get that level of an idea where I'm just like, it just comes to me, it's a little unstoppable. It's exhilarating, it's exciting. And I remember when I started the parenting blog that I co-founded with a few of my friends, this is how that moment went. So I'm lying in bed. It's like 7:30 in the morning, and I never get up this early, but my eyes flew open, and it was instantly like I was awake, and I was like, Ottawa Valley Moms. It was like the name just flooded into my head. I had no idea like what it looked like or what it was going to have, like what shape it would take. All I knew was I had the name in my head. So I ran to my computer, sat down, registered the domain name, and then built the website. And then I emailed my friends and I was like, hey guys, so I kind of have this idea and I built this whole website, and do you want to do it with me? And so like those moments are, and even as I talk, you can hear in my voice the excitement that comes along with those ideas. And I'm sure everybody watching this has had a moment like that, where you've had a moment where that idea's flooded in and you have just felt like unstoppable, right? And excited. So the question then becomes, how important is it to you that big idea live? And when you ask yourself that, I want you to really feel into that. Feel into what it feels like when you get that idea, and feel into who do you want to receive it? And who else do you want to get excited about that idea? You know, obviously one of the things we want to do is make our ideas very contagious. You know, we want to be able to spread those, have the idea spread, get people excited, get people involved and invested. And we don't want that to feel like work, right? We don't want to feel like we're dragging people along or that they're not as excited. We have to convince them. It's important for us to just have that moment where those people share equally in that excitement, because it is exciting. You know, our ideas are awesome. But the truth of the matter is that 8 out of 10 business ideas fail, as I said. So because this happens, and that means only 2 ideas are sort of passing that litmus test, we really need to look at what's not working. And so what's not working anymore is this old adage of, if you build it, they will come. So the idea there is that, you know, if I go back to using Ottawa Valley Moms as an example, the idea would be that, like, oh, we'll build it and people are just going to flood to the site. They're going to love it. You know, who's not going to like this? And while we did have very fast success with Ottawa Valley Moms, and it did take off pretty quickly, it still was not a, we still couldn't rest on our laurels and simply just say, hey, let's build it and people will flood in, right? We had to be a little bit more creative than that. And the reason that that doesn't work anymore is that there's far too many choices for consumers. So when you think about, you know, whether, let's say you're in a charitable organization, there are a myriad of other charitable organizations that people could become invested in, that they could get emotionally connected to. If you have a product, there's a good chance that that product, you know, that product market is saturated with similar products. If you're in a service-based business, it's the same thing. If you're fighting, you know, with like just even to get your own opinion heard and validated, you're going to be fighting against other people with other opinions. So one of the things that we need to make sure that happens is that we cut through the noise, we disrupt the conversation, and we quit being passive. So it's not enough anymore to just simply stay in a bubble, build the thing, you know, on our own. We think it's fabulous. We think it's the best thing ever. And then put it out into the world and have everybody flood in and say, oh my God, I love it too. You know, that the chances of that happening nowadays, slim to none. And again, if we go back to why that is, it's just that there's too much. There's too many choices, too much noise, too much everything right now. So one of the things that happens, and this is probably, if there's anything you take away, I'm going to give it to you in the first 15 minutes. So if you learn nothing else from this entire thing, I want you to learn this. And that is that we as idea powerhouses, we tend to dream, create, and plan in secret. And then when we launch it and people don't care as much as we care, we feel disappointed. So we feel disappointed when people aren't showing up to that idea in the same way. And when you think about that, when you think about the fact that we sort of have this very intimate relationship with our idea, we have this very intimate relationship with our brand, with our company, with our employees, with our staff, with our clients. We have a very intimate and connected and close relationship to that because we're up against it every single day. We're the closest to it. But other people out there that are maybe even one step removed, they don't have that. They don't have that same emotional connection. They don't have the same investment. They don't have the same engagement or interest. And when we can begin to understand that piece, and we understand that we are going to be up against this notion that people just aren't as excited, then we can sort of reverse engineer it to figure out what do we need to do to get people super excited. And if we look at this, what I've got up on the screen now, like if we just want to wrap it in a bubble, it's this. So the intimacy that you feel with your idea is not a shared or understood experience. And if we sort of use let's use an analogy for this. So if you think about when you're in a relationship, okay, let's say you're in a new relationship with somebody or even an old relationship with somebody and you meet someone else for the first time. So you're meeting a friend or a colleague and they're, you know, asking you about your relationship with your spouse or your partner or your child or whomever it is, whatever kind of relationship you've got. If you try to describe that that becomes really difficult, right? So sometimes you can like nail it, but other times it's just sort of like, yeah, you know, we're a perfect fit. We work really well together, but people aren't getting the depth of that, right? They're not going deep. They're not understanding it. And this person could be your soulmate, or this person could be, you know, like an amazing human being, but it's very difficult to communicate that. So that intimacy that you feel with that person is the same thing that happens that you feel with your brand or your product or service or idea or whatever it might be. And then it becomes your job to let people in and communicate that with them. So I want to talk a little bit about how we can begin to create that intimacy. Before we even jump into how to tell stories and, you know, the platforms on which to tell the stories, we need to understand how to create intimacy. And a lot of us, because we're maybe not marketers or not storytellers, and maybe oftentimes we are way too close to our idea, and therefore we have a more, you know, difficult time getting sort of that further away perspective or that big picture view. What we need to do is we need to really just understand how intimacy is formed, and then how we can share it. So I always tell people that the greatest enemy of persuasion, the thing that you're going to bump up against the most with anything in life, and it doesn't even matter if we're talking storytelling or marketing, is obscurity. So the greatest enemy of persuasion is obscurity. Getting someone to do something or feel something or, you know, take action or anything. The primary reason that they're not going to do any of those things is because the thing that you're trying to get them to do is too obscure. You haven't done a good enough job of explaining it. You haven't done a good enough job of getting them connected and hooked. So it's not your customer's job to find the reasons to become emotionally invested. It's actually your job to help them get there. And it's also not their job to find themselves in the one way you're communicating, but rather it's your job to communicate the same message in different ways so that it resonates with different groups of people. And I think that's another thing that we tend to do. So how many people, and obviously I know you can't really tell me right now, but how many of you, and just you can sort of just ESP this to me, but how can relate to the being in a room or in a strategy session or in a meeting or whatever it might be, and or even just kind of seeing this come across your desk, but you get one strategy for your marketing, one strategy to launch something, one strategy around a campaign, and then people run with that. So companies will spend a lot of dollars, you know, crafting this one finely tuned marketing message that's then going to go out. And I'm not talking about like an overarching brand. I'm talking about to launch something specific or to like, you know, bring a campaign to the public. So they'll spend all this time crafting one. And that's going to resonate with a group of people, probably the majority of your demographic if you've done a really good job at identifying them. But the truth of the matter is that your demographic is actually comprised of multiple people and multiple types of people. And they're all at different phases of the buying cycle. They're all at different phases of the interest cycle. They're all emotionally connected in different ways. And so it's actually your job not to create one campaign or one marketing strategy or one story, but to craft multiple stories. And each of those have to be finely tuned to the individual groups. So I want to talk about Tom's Shoes. So Tom's Shoes is a fantastic shoe brand. But here's the best part. They're actually not that well known for their shoes. Their shoes, in terms of the quality and the materials that they use, is actually secondary. What is primary is the fact that they put soul into buying new soles. So if you're not familiar with Tom's, here's what they do. So Tom's Shoes, you go to tomsshoes.com. I think it's .com. You buy the shoes. I believe you can buy them in some retail outlets, but most people, or anytime I bought them online. But for every single pair of shoes that Tom's Shoes sells, they give a pair of shoes to somebody in need in a third world developing country. So that means that you can feel really good about buying shoes. When you buy these shoes and you put them on your feet, every single time you're feeling a little bit of that social good, you're feeling a little bit of that emotional connection to the brand and to the people who are getting shoes because of your purchase. So again, what they've done is they've entered a saturated market. They've entered a market where like there is a lot of shoes being sold, and their shoes really aren't that special. If you look at them, most of them are little sneakers or flats and like little wrap shoes, and they've got a unique look. But now there's tons of copycats. But again, what they did is they didn't walk in and say, "Hey, we sell shoes, and let's focus on yet one other potential quality of the shoe." Instead, they kind of came in with this side benefit and got people engaged and excited and interested in the company because of the social good that they were doing. So this is about taking something that exists and it happens all the time and telling a different story. There's also another great example. So Central Beer House is a restaurant here in Canada. If you're not from Ottawa, you have no idea what I'm talking about, but I live in a little suburb called Canada. And Central Beer House is a new restaurant there, and it's a fantastic restaurant. It's not a chain. It's opened by the guy in the middle, Pat, and some partners that you can see on the sides, and then a whole bunch of other partners. But Central Beer House it could be observed as any other new restaurant opening, right? So a restaurant opens, it looks like they almost all look like chains nowadays, unless you're in sort of one of the more like little, smaller communities. But it could be observed as just another restaurant going in. But when you go into the restaurant and you begin to talk to the owners and you talk to the staff and you talk to the people behind the bar, and you start to realize that this restaurant was actually built so purposefully that every detail in the restaurant was chosen for a very specific reason, and that there's stories attached to all of it. So like there's a clock behind the bar, and like that clock came from like a theater in Toronto, and they like brought it in, and it's very German looking, and so they wanted it to be the staple and the centerpiece of this whole space. And they've chosen to go with like these long picnic tables instead of regular tables in much of the restaurant, so that people could start to like get together in communities, because in beer houses in Germany, that's what they do, is they sit together and it's very communal and people feel connected. And so when you begin to explore, this restaurant, you understand that it's actually not just a restaurant, that there's a whole bunch else of other kind of things happening in the undertones. And these stories are fantastic. These are the kinds of stories that I'm going to tell my friends, that you need to go here because of the picnic tables, and it's communal and you'll love it, and that kind of thing. So it gives you something to latch onto other than just, the food's great, or whatever the case might be. So you want to find ways, even in very obvious markets, you want to find ways to get people excited by telling these individual stories that some people will care about, some people won't, but that they are interesting and they're a little bit different. So Seth Godin, during a TED Talk, said that we're in the century of idea diffusion, and people who can get ideas to spread will win. And I truly believe this. I think that we are in a moment of time right now where it is very difficult to get our message out. It's very difficult to get people to care. And it's not that they don't care in terms of it's not like they're the opposite of that and they're rebelling against what you're doing, but it's just that we're all so busy these days and we all have so much on the go, and we've got a lot of places we could turn our attention to. So if we can get people to latch on to what we're doing and really enjoy it and become emotionally invested, we will win. We will be able to get ahead. So just before I move to intimacy, I'm just going to do a little refresh. I think I actually see a little spot on the Google Hangouts portion where you can type a question. Oh yeah, there it is. So for anyone that's listening, if you want to put anything in there, feel free. I will be refreshing that screen. You can't do it if you're on the website, because that's obviously there's no chat function there. But again, you can email me or tweet me. I'm just going to do a quick check of all those places just to make sure everything's okay. We're good. Awesome. Okay. I just don't want to miss anything and have somebody, yelling at me that something's on fire. Okay, so let's move into intimacy. So I'm just going to take a quick sip of water. All right. So intimacy is one of my favorite topics right now. I mean, it has been my favorite topic for about the last year and a half. But I love the notion that emotion and emotional connection and intimacy can be the forefront of a lot of people's businesses and brands and that kind of thing. I love that because there is nothing more powerful than human connection. People when you create that moment of openness and vulnerability and connection and all of that good stuff, people feel that it's approached so much more differently than if they're just getting like a standard press release or a standard blog post or something that doesn't have a lot of heart. And actually, in that said, blog posts and press releases can be made to have a lot of heart. The truth of the matter is a lot of them just aren't. But I think intimacy is great. So when we start with this notion of intimacy, I want to look at this chart that's on my screen. So this is like the old model. And this is what most people do. So they come up with a concept, and this could be, again, a launch, a campaign, a brand new idea, an old idea revived, whatever it might be. And you could even break this down so finely down to like, this could be a blog post, or this could be an email you're sending out to your list. So most people come up with the idea or the concept. And then what they do is they plan. And then once they're done planning, they move into the building phase. And once they're done building, then they launch it. So in my own business, I see this a lot when a client is creating something like a group coaching program or an online course, or they're building an ebook, or they're creating something that's product or service oriented. So all of this phase that you see on here is often done in a bubble. And what I mean by that is they do this on their own. They do this without input. They just simply do this. They conceptualize it, plan it, build it, and then they launch it. And in that entire process, they haven't let anybody else in. Now, maybe their own team has come in, maybe some trusted advisors, but the people that they're creating the thing for have not seen it. They haven't seen it. They don't know anything about it. They haven't heard about it. They haven't been teased, little pieces of information about it. Like nothing has happened to that point. And the reason that that's an old model, and the reason that it does not work at all, is because it keeps that idea way too close to the creator. So there's no opportunity for connection with your audience until you launch. And then the expectation often is, I've launched it, come and buy it, or consume it or enjoy it. But there hasn't been anything where anybody has sort of had a hook put in them. And there's nobody waiting for it. There's nobody, there's none of that. And the building of the relationship in the old model happens once the thing comes to market or is published or is posted or is shared, versus that happening before. So I want to start today, and this is going to be an ongoing, journey for you in terms of like keeping this in mind with everything you create or produce or share or publish. I want you to start thinking about that. How can you bring people into the experience before you get to the end, before you get to the point where you want to launch? And I think the reason that this happens, that people keep everything so close to themselves, and like there's a reason why things are embargoed, like when you get a press release and it's like embargoed to a certain date. There's a reason all of that happens. And the reason it happens is because creators and idea generators are often afraid. They're afraid of their idea being stolen. They're afraid of their idea being, having bubble or sort of a pin poked in their bubble before it even begins. They're afraid that if they let people in, that by the time they get to launch, people won't be as interested. They're afraid of a lot. But mostly people are afraid of showing other people their mess. And this is something that comes up a lot with my clients. So we'll be having these conversations about, all right, we need to, and I'll tell them, I'm like, we need to show people some of this stuff as we're making it or as we're creating it, or, we need to show people behind the scenes stuff. What does your office look like? What does it look like when you're, sketching out sort of your 12-month business plan? Like, what does all of that look like? And people are often really afraid to show that stuff. They want to keep it so that everything's very polished and presented and, for lack of a better word, perfect before it goes out into the world. And I think that does a huge disservice. I want to tell you a little story. So I was in Las Vegas, And I'm looking around. I don't think I have it in my office. Anyway, so I was in Las Vegas, and if any of you have ever been to Las Vegas and been walking down the street, they have these street vendors. And the street vendors make these beautiful pieces of art using spray paint and spatulas and knives and all kinds of crazy things. But they do these beautiful artwork, or this beautiful artwork, and they do it right on the street. So, and I'm sure you, I mean, there's variations of this, right? There's the caricature artists, there's like people who paint on the street, there's people who do music on the street, like there's all kinds of stuff. So, I mean, really what we could talk about here is like the live production of something and doing so publicly. And so these creators have to sort of release their fear, and they go in public and they make these beautiful things. And when they do that, they are showing their mask. If they screw up, people will see that, you know. But and that is a possibility, right? The potential of error, the potential of screwing up, so to speak, is there, and that's not going to go away when you're sharing things in real time or you're having people watch a live performance. But the beauty of it is that when it happens, that person, and if I go back to this painter, and he made me a painting, when it happens that the person gets to be involved in some way, and even if that's simply witnessing that experience, there is an emotional connection that happens there because that artist or the creator was vulnerable, and I got to experience the vulnerability, and I get to watch the piece being created, and all of a sudden I'm a part of it, you know, as the audience member or the content consumer. I'm a part of it. And so that's what happens when you start to share some of the back end stuff, and you start to share some of the behind the scenes stuff. You let people in such a way that they feel a part of it. They feel that they're actually making emotional deposits into whatever it is you're doing or creating or inventing or whatever it might be, even before you start. And I think when we strive for perfectionism, when we try to get everything to be perfect and we try to put out a polished, you know, look into the world, what we do is we actually miss the opportunity to be authentic. And that's what people are craving the most. They want to see that the organizations that they deal with, that the businesses that they do business with, that the people that they're interacting with, they want to know that they're authentic and real and human, and that they understand them, you know, from a real perspective and not just like a transactional perspective. So the old model that I showed you that keeps the mess out, it also keeps the real connection at an arm's length. And so I think what I want to encourage everybody to do is just really start to think about, how can you be a little more vulnerable? How can you be a little bit more open? How can you show people a little bit more of what goes into the creation of whatever it is you're creating, or the day-to-day operations of whatever it is you're doing, in such a way that they get to understand the blood, sweat, and tears. They get to experience the passion. I have another fantastic example of this. So I love wine. Like, I don't love wine to a point where I drink it every day, but I do quite enjoy a glass of wine. And it's got to be red. But I never really had a favorite wine. You know, I was sort of like, I'd walk into the grocery store, or not the grocery store, the liquor store, and I'd be like, I don't really know. You know, this bottle looks good, and it's in my price point. Fantastic. You know, let's just grab this one. And sometimes I would stumble across one that I liked, so I'd jot it down and, you know, aim to get that one each time. But I didn't have a beeline approach when I went into the LCBO. It wasn't like, I'm walking in the door, I know exactly which one I'm grabbing, and here's why. You know, I had none of that. Until I went to the Niagara region here in Ontario, and I visited a vineyard there called Flat Rock Cellars. And when I visited Flat Rock Cellars, we were with a private group, and so we had a tour of the vineyard, and we got to meet the winemaker. And the winemaker was one of the most passionate people I've ever met in my entire life across all industries. He was just oozing with passion for this wine. I could have listened to him tell me the process of aerating wine or whatever they do to it. I could have listened to that like all day, you know, for like many hours, because it was his passion and like was just exuding. And so combine the passion that he had with also getting this full behind the scenes, very immersive experience. And it quickly became my favorite wine. And now if I go into the LCBO to pick up a bottle of wine, I do beeline it. I beeline it straight to the vintages section. I pick up a right now it's the 2012 that's out. So a 2012 Flat Rock Cellars Pinot Noir, and that is the bottle of wine I buy. And I don't deviate anymore. And the reason is because every single time I open that bottle of wine and I pour that glass and I sit down and I enjoy it, I'm actually not just enjoying it for the wine. I feel like I'm actually sipping up little bits of his passion, like I do. I feel like I understand now what goes into that wine. I understand the process and the care and the delicacy and, all that stuff. And I could wax poetic about this for a very long time. I won't. But the point of all of that is to say that when you allow people that opportunity to become a part of the experience, and you let them in and you become vulnerable and you share the stories that matter, and you talk to them as though they're, people that you really truly care about, it changes everything. It changes how you talk, in your marketing. It changes how you write on your blog. It changes how you post a post on Facebook. It changes, your daily interactions. Like, it changes everything. And sorry, this quote's cut off too, but Brene Brown says that you can't cheat real connection, that it has to be built slowly and over time. And I think oftentimes we do approach marketing and storytelling in a very rushed manner. It's very rushy, and often because we're having those conversations or trying to have them either really close to launch or after launch. And there is a lot of urgency at that point, because the feeling is, okay, this is out now. This is live. We need action, so like chop, chop, like get on this. But that's actually the backward approach. So we want to start this conversation with our audience well beforehand. We want to be starting this conversation, weeks in advance. We want to be building these relationships and creating these moments of opportunity for connection and all that good stuff well in advance. So if it's true that customers gravitate toward the stories and messages that are most important to them, this then becomes our job, is to figure out, what are those stories? What are people going to resonate with? How are they going to resonate with it? And how do I share that story in a way that they're going to actually be able to consume it and access it? But before we can do that, we need to understand the audience. Now, I'm going to talk in this section about a few things that are a little bit different than what you're probably normally used to hearing. So most people, when they talk about audience, they talk about demographics. So male, female, age, location, buying power, all this kind of demographic-y kind of stuff. That's what they normally focus on. I'm going to show you something that's a little bit different. Now, it might be a little bit at first a little hard to understand how innovation and launching matches up with audience, but bear with me through when I share it with you, and hopefully by the end it's clear. But just know at first it might feel a little bit like confusing, just because it is a little different than the way that you might normally be used to talking about this. Before we do that, though, I want to share with you two more examples of companies that create really good immersive experiences. And I want you to each be thinking about, for your own business or organization or whatever it might be, even if it's, like I said, a personal brand, how can you create immersive experiences? How can you bring people in to that experience so that they actually feel like they're a part of it, that they're contributing to the end product, that they are, having a say in what happens with the organization or the company? So 718 Cyclery in New York City actually is a bike company that focuses on collaborative builds. So what I mean by that is that they focus on sort of selling individual parts of a bike. So they'll get somebody in, they'll have a consult, they'll talk a little bit about what their lifestyle is like, what they need the bike for. And then once they've done that, they order the parts together, and then they set a date in the near future where the person actually comes back into the location and they build the bike with somebody, with a technician. So they are fully immersed in that entire process. And these bikes aren't cheap, you know, like they're thousands of dollars. But the beauty of it is that the people, when they're then riding their bike later, it's not that they're just riding a bike that they bought at a store. It is now that they are riding a bike that they bought and built, you know? Like they didn't just like purchase it. They actually, their hands went into like turning the nuts and bolts and connecting the gears and all that stuff. And so that creates a moment where people feel like, I did this. And now I'm going to tell my friends because it creates a story. Nobody's that interested when you're like, yeah, I picked up a bike at Canadian Tire this weekend, you know, or at like Bush Taka or wherever you might want to buy a bike. People aren't that excited about that, let's be honest. But if you're like, hey, I built this bike, people are like, really? How did you do that? And then it becomes a conversation. So find a way that you can create those moments for your own audience. How can you give them an opportunity to be a part of it and then have stories that they can then go and spread? Because that, again, is going to kind of create that virality that many people are looking for. So Lee Valley Tools is another perfect example. With Lee Valley Tools, what they've done is they've really changed the shopping experience. When you go into Lee Valley, you know, like you go in and you pick out a piece of paper and then you kind of wander around, but there's not really shelves where you can pick stuff up. You're often really, you know, handheld by a member of their staff that's there. And it just feels very different. So they've created an opportunity to change the retail buying experience and have something that people can talk about in the sense where it's like, you know, you go in and it's just different. It's different than anything else out there. But the other thing that they do that I really like is this philosophy that they have up here. So it's that they treat the customer like a friend. So we would do everything for you that we would do for a friend, including where necessary, telling you if you're being unreasonable. And I love that. I love that the company is going to be honest with you. They're obviously creating a very intimate and very personable brand experience. And so they've stuck to it, that they're going to tell you, if you come in and you want to do a specific project and you think that this tool is going to be better than another tool, they're going to tell you, like, no. You know, no, listen to me, I'm the expert. And that's what a friend would do. And so I just thought that was fantastic that they've got like that level of honesty, you know, built into that. So your job as a creator is then to identify your markets and determine their values. And each of the markets are going to have different values. And so we're gonna dive into a little bit more about that right now. Let me just check Twitter. Oh, thank you. I know I love peeking in and seeing the tweets that are happening. It's good. Okay, so we're going to dive in now to the adoption life cycle. The adoption life cycle is something that, again, we don't often look at when we're thinking about a marketing campaign, but it's really important, and I'm going to show you why. So this fancy chart is actually called the diffusion of innovation. And so the diffusion of innovation is a timeline or sort of a breakdown of each of the individual groups that exist in our demographic and at what point in the process or the life cycle they are going to adopt that idea, that product, that service, that creation, whatever it might be. And so you kind of have to picture it like the left-hand side of this chart where it says innovators. This is like your early days. Okay, so when you're starting the relationship building process or you're starting the marketing process, the storytelling process, whatever it might be, this is early days. This is early in that process, the left-hand side. And then as you move through the groups, early adopters, early majority, late majority, and laggards, you can imagine time passing. So the innovators get sort of the first look, and then the laggards are the people you don't really even want to focus much effort on marketing to, but if you do, you do it way down the road. Maybe you try to get those people, you know, a year from now. So time is, if you can imagine that, going kind of across the bottom, and then the individual groups falling along that launch timeline, okay? And if you want to look at it in terms of adoption, so when are people going to actually latch onto the idea or the thing or the campaign and go like, yes, love this. Innovators will be first, early adopters second, early majority third, etc. Okay? And again, I'm going to explain this a little bit more, but I know at first glance this chart can be somewhat a little confusing. Okay, so innovators. Innovators are obsessed with trying new things. These are the people that they want to be first to something. They want to be able to like bring it to their own audiences. They usually rely less on group norms, more on their own values. They often have higher incomes. They're more worldly. These people are the people that will, pre-order the new iPhone or the new iWatch like months in, like the minute that pre-order window opens. And or they're the people that the company is sending the watches to well in advance, right? So these are the people that are getting in first. The reason that this group is so important to the launch timeline and the storytelling process is that these are the people that you want to put information into the hands of early on. These are the people that are going to carry that message. They're going to spread it for you. They're going to be the people that do the most amount of work. So and that's naturally because they're usually go-getters and they're usually like, and they thrive, it seems, on having information that nobody else has. So if you can tap into this group and give them information that they haven't received yet, and then kind of champion them, this is a really great group for you. The next group, and again, if we think about, this is going to be sort of the second group we want to focus on in terms of like getting closer to like launching something or publicizing something or whatever it might be. This is our early adopters. So our early adopters, they rely more on group norms. So they're the people that might line up in the lineup, the day that the iPhone comes out, but they may not have pre-ordered it. Or they might be waiting to sort of see what the general consensus of the group is and then making a decision after that. These people are often opinion leaders, so they might have a very strong voice on social, blogs, wherever it might be. They enjoy leading edge products, so they really do like to stay on the cutting edge of technology. Or for example, like in my own business, these are the clients that if I pitch them an idea that's like new, for example, when I first started talking about all this storytelling stuff, a lot of my clients were like, what? Like, I don't get it. But my early adopters clients, the ones that love to be on the cutting edge of everything, they were like, yes, let's do it. What is it? Like, tell me everything. So these people are great to champion as well because they're very excited and invested. And oftentimes these are the people that then encourage their friends and family to either buy or get involved, or they spread the message a little bit better. And then we've got early majority and late majority. So these people are this kind of group often makes up the largest number of people, but these people collect a bit more information. They're a little bit slower to make that decision. They tend to listen to the opinions of leaders. So these are the people that won't stand in line for an iWatch, but if they read enough blog posts from people they respect and the blog posts say like the iWatch is fantastic, then they'll likely go and get it. But it's going to take them a little bit longer. They're often in a lower income bracket, and this is the person that tends to buy everything that they've got because somebody else already has it. They're very influenced. And so the reason that this makes up the majority of people is because the majority of people do live in this space. They live in a space where they wait to see, or they want to read reviews, or they want to see if there's a second edition coming, and they don't have as much free trust, right? So they're not as willing to just like throw caution to the wind and invest. They want to know that that's safe, that that they're proceeding forward and making that decision and investing is a safe thing to do. And then, of course, you have laggards. And if my mom is ever watching this, I'm sorry, Mom, but I basically kind of look at my mom as being in this category when it relates specifically to technology. So their past influences their purchases. They're often suspicious of change, and their purchases are often because they have to versus they want to. An example would be when I said my mom, is that she only switched to a smartphone when she no longer could, sort of like function in terms of like, her work needed her to do certain things, and she couldn't do that with her old flip phone. So she had to move to a smartphone. So she's more in that category of it takes a lot of convincing, and or if their past has really influenced them in a certain way, they actually might be quick to purchase, but they have to have a lot of influence, prior to that thing being put in front of them. They'd have to have a lot of, like, either a lot of nostalgia or a lot of emotional connection or investment. So these people, it takes them a lot longer. Which, if we go back to that chart, makes sense that they're on the end of the timeline, because by the time you've put something out into the world, and let's say it's been out for a year, that's usually when the laggards are getting interested. They're not getting interested on day 1 or 2 or even, month 3. So when you research the end user and you know their motives, that'll give you a lot of information about how to craft that marketing campaign or how to tell those stories and when to tell them. So as I mentioned, it's not enough just to have stories, or a story. You want to have multiple stories. You want to have multiple stories for each group, and you want to be dropping those stories in sequence as to when it makes sense to do that. And I've got the most beautiful example of how of a company that's done this, and I'll share with you with you in a few moments. But it's there's a company that oh my God, they nailed it. So I'm going to share that in a second. Excuse me. So when you know your audience inside and out, you can create a better widget. So whatever that looks like for you. But more importantly, you can start to create resonance. And resonance is that moment that I was talking about. I love these slides. My E is hanging. So resonance is that moment I was talking about where people look at the thing that you're doing and they feel that it's perfectly designed for them. They feel like you're speaking directly to them. When you start to do that, people get really engaged and interested and invested. So on my screen right now is a screen capture from a video game called Destiny. Now, don't tune out, even if you're not a gaming fan. I promise that this is relevant. At this point, it's so funny, when I delivered this workshop at Invest Ottawa, a few people were like, uh-oh, you could just see in their face, uh-oh, she's going to the video game part of her world. And but bear with me, because this story is one of my favorite stories, and this company nailed it. And it's a perfect example for me to share about the dance that happens with the stories you're going to tell, and when you're going to tell them, and who you're going to tell them for. But before I jump into that, I'm just going to take a quick sip of water. All right, and let me just quickly check my social and my email to make sure that there's no questions. I think we're still good. All right, awesome. Okay, so Destiny. And if you have any children in your life, or even any adults, because most of my friends that play Destiny are adults, you can tell them that you learned a little bit about Destiny today. Okay, so Destiny, as I mentioned, is a video game, and the really super cool thing about Destiny is that they launched a brand new game in a brand new market, in an industry or in a niche that had not been created yet, and they knocked it out of the park. They won so many awards. They had $500 million in sales on the first day, or I think it's actually $550 million in sales on the first day. They just rocked the world in terms of, or the gaming world. They just nailed it. So I want to tell you about how they did it. And how they did it is really important, as I mentioned, even if you're not a gamer, because it really shows how telling the right stories on a time frame that is, that actually lines up is really, really valuable. So Destiny actually started getting marketed in 2009, and it wasn't released until 2014. Yeah, so 5 years or 6 years. There was a 6 year or 5 or 6 year window of marketing for Destiny, even when people didn't know that it was called Destiny. So let me take you back in time. So let's travel back to 2009. And in 2009, an Easter egg, which is like a little hidden nugget of information, was found in Halo 3 ODST, which is another game created by the same developers. And it was a poster on a wall in-game that said Destiny awaits, and it had the Earth and a moon. This was dropped in here, and the only people that figured out that this was something that could be worth considering were, kind of the hardcore gamers, the people that play games a lot, that would go around and they look at everything in game. And so people fell across this. They saw that this was a thing, and it started popping up on some of the gaming forums. People started the conversation like, ooh, what is this? What is this about? Do you think that they're creating a new game? And what do you think the game's going to be about? And like all these conversations started happening. So this, again, was 5 years prior to the game ever being released and any part of the game even being conceptualized publicly. In 2011, so 2 years later, so they dropped this Easter egg and then went silent. There was nothing more. But 2 years later, Bungie was filming a documentary, or I don't know if they were actually the ones filming it, but they were in a documentary called Oh Brave New World. And in the documentary, they had stuff up on the monitors that were moments where they were creating characters and they were designing the backdrops for the game, and they were doing all this kind of really cool stuff. But still, Destiny didn't have a name yet. So this video game was not public, but now there was more. There were more little screens of things, and the people that were paying attention, the innovators and the early adopters, were looking at these screen captures and going kind of like, ooh, what is that? Like, that is from a game we have not seen yet. You know, like, what is that? So again, it was like teasing them with information. So the poster was a tease. These little screenshots in this documentary were a tease. Inside the documentary, they also referred to the Destiny project as like Project Tiger or something like that. So they didn't even call it what the game's name was, but they teased their audience and these people that were the most, in the industry with this information. In 2013, they finally released the name. So 2013 rolls around, they throw up this like super simple WordPress template that's not even branded nicely. It definitely is not indicative of the budget that they had for this game. But they throw it up and then they just simply write, so our game is called Destiny. Nothing fancy, not a big giant press release, not this like huge media blitz, just literally blog up, and our game is called Destiny. And also, here's where you can come and connect with us. So they launched a Facebook page, a Twitter account, a Google Plus page, and they started, they opened a forum, and they began collecting people that would be interested in Destiny. And you can see also in the post, they say, in a matter of days, we're going to give you your first glimpse into the vision and ambition that's driving the creation of our brave new world. So the reason that this is so valuable is because it shows you that this company was not trying to create a polished product before putting it out. In fact, they put it out when it's not even, like, it hadn't even, really been a thing. There's not really any branding associated with it. But it was more important for them to start collecting the community of people that were excited in a little space or a corral, so to speak, so that when it did come out, they had all these people already rallied. Okay, so this is 2013, and the game, again, doesn't come out until 2014. So a full year before they start corralling their audience. And then also in 2013, around the same time, so once they made the public announcement on their site, they also invited gaming press into their offices. They all had to sign non-disclosure agreements, but they came in and these people got like kind of a first glimpse of the game. They got to ask the creators and developers questions. This was really vital because it allowed the gaming press to feel like they were, being involved in the process, given insider information, and then it also gave them something to be first to market with. Meaning, like, for a gaming website or any sort of like a blog or a website or a news outlet, people want the information first. They want to be the first to break a story. And so by inviting these people in and then saying like, hey, you're going to be the first to break this story, so, make sure you do it. Of course, these people are going to be like frothing at the mouth to get this information out, right? So it really gave them an opportunity to, again, get more people involved and invested in that process. In June of 2013, they went to E3, which is one of the biggest sort of gaming and kind of geeky like conferences in the States. So at E3, they revealed the trailer, and the trailer was actually produced really, really well. Like, it had a Led Zeppelin song attached to it. It was really like, it was cinematic. It felt like a movie. It was just like, it was very, very well done. Knocked it out of the park with that. In fact, Destiny's marketing campaign actually won a gold award at a recent video game marketing award ceremony, because it was just incredible. So they did this trailer, again, getting people excited. So the game's not out, it's nowhere near being released, but this process of getting people emotionally invested and emotionally excited is, you know, obviously it's working. So it's giving now people something to share and talk about. After all of that happened, so E3, the reveal trailer, etc., then they started to drop better graphics around their marketing. So here you can see that they're like, we can't wait to show you what's next, you know, love Bungie. And they're like tying in this like emotional connection and building anticipation. And they started putting out some blog posts and some screenshots of the game and, you know, just little teasers. And they did this for a full year, even before the game came out. A little while after that, they also released another video documentary, this time talking about the making of Destiny. They gave fans a behind-the-scenes look. They let them, you know, see the creators and developers, which if we go back to my wine example, when you see the person that's creating it in their creation space and you see the passion that they have for it, it's contagious. So that was really, really a good thing for that company to do at the time. And then what happened is then they allowed press to go live. So in this moment, this was in July of 2014. This is the moment that sort of the game went from being something that was simply talked about like within the community to now being a public thing. It started to go beyond the community that was sort of built and corralled. This is now moving out into the public. It's reaching broader audiences. It's starting that, like, you know, if we can almost imagine moss crawling across a forest ground, you know, like this is what's happening in this phase. So they've started giving these gaming press websites first looks and sneak peeks and map reveals and behind the scenes and, you know, all kinds of good stuff. But again, building that buzz, building that anticipation, and building that opportunity to connect with something emotionally. So then launch day rolls around, September 9th, 2014, and $500 million in sales on day one. They actually won awards. They were the biggest new franchise launch in history. So they, like, in history of all video games, which like is unreal. And they were the highest selling day one digital console release in history. So nobody else had ever sold more than they did. And the reason that they did that is because they knew their audience. They knew their audience so incredibly well. They knew what mattered to each group of that audience. They knew where to reach them and how to reach them. They knew what stories to tell, like whether that was through the documentaries or the sneak peeks or, you know, someone hearing it through another outlet like a gaming website. And then they hit all channels. In fact, I was standing in New York City one day last year, and there was a bus that drove by, like a Greyhound style bus, and it was fully wrapped in Destiny. Like it was just like the entire thing. And I remember freaking out because at the time I was obviously following this very closely. And I remember being like, oh my gosh, there's a Destiny bus. So they just like, they were everywhere. Like they hit mainstream, they hit like underground, like it was everywhere. But they did it in such a way that like they really, it was a beautiful dance. And if you kind of like think back to what I talked about, and you think about that sort of the different groups across like a timeline, they really did do that beautifully. They knew how to, you know, hook in those hardcore gamers and then how to get the casual gamers. And, you know, even now today, they're still doing a lot of marketing around their new expansion packs and things. And they're knocking that out of the park too. Like they're just doing such a great job at really connecting with their audience and telling the stories that matter. So now I want to move into storytelling. I'm just going to do a quick email and social check. And if you've joined us late, if the questions box on the webinar for some reason isn't working, or I can't turn it on. So if you do have a question, you can always send it to Erin@ErinBlaskie.com, or you can tweet it to @ErinBlaskie, or you can Facebook me, or, you know, whatever you like. I think we're good still for now. Awesome. Okay, so let's move into storytelling, because this is an exciting piece, obviously why you're all here. And I always love starting with the pieces I did start with. So like the resonance and the intimacy and that kind of thing and the emotional connection, because it's very easy to learn a tactic. You know, it's very easy to learn like do X, do Y, show up here, post this, you know? But if you don't understand what needs to go into fueling that and the creation of that, you're going to miss the mark. Even if you follow like the step-by-step how to, like specifically, if the message isn't crafted for the right audience and it doesn't say, you know, it doesn't kind of open up to that moment for vulnerability and that kind of thing, you will miss the mark, even if your execution is perfect. So I start with that to kind of get you into that mindset of why that's so valuable and important. And then we move into like actually how to tell the stories. So Tony Robbins says that emotion is the force of life. And he says that you should use it. So if we think about that, if we think about emotion being the force of life, and if you think even about your own purchase patterns, unless it's something that's like, you know, super non-emotional, like grabbing like garbage bags or toilet paper, you know, like that's a non-emotional purchase. But if you start thinking about like, you know, let's say where you invest your charitable dollars every year, those things are grounded in emotion. Those things, there's a reason you pick the charity you pick. There's a reason why, you know, that you might choose a specific business owner to work with. Like anytime that you start diving into that space of like working with like a brand or a person that's more humanized, emotion exists there. And it's really important to figure out how to get people emotional. And as I've shown you, even with wine and shoes, which usually, you know, may not be an emotional purchase, you still can make it emotional. But it's about finding the angle at which people will begin to resonate with that particular message. So how do you build an emotional connection? This is sort of the question of the day. How do you go about that? So the first way that you do that is to focus on the customer. First and foremost, like the best thing I can tell you to do if you have a website is to go to your website later tonight or tomorrow, or whenever you get a moment. And I want you to read through the copy. And when you read through that copy, what I want you to do is I want you to see how much of that copy is focused on you or your organization or your brand versus being focused on the customer. So I recently did a blog post, and actually, I won't pull it up on the screen, but if you, at some point later, if you go to erinblaskie.com and then you go to blog, or it's just erinblaskie.com/blog, there is a blog post that I did recently called 4 Questions to Help You Determine What to Put on Your Website's Homepage. And that in that post, I have one specific piece that is really relevant to this, and that's answering the question of who do I serve and what do they want? So a lot of times when we build a website or we put out like a new marketing piece or whatever it might be, when we do that, we're often very focused on ourselves. We're focused on what the organization or the company or the brand is doing, what the benefit is of the thing we're doing. And we talk about it like, I can help you do XYZ, or, you know, this organization supports XYZ. But what you really want to do is you actually want to turn it around and get people or give people reasons to become emotionally connected. Tim Ferriss, who's the author of the 4-Hour Workweek, he's done this on his website and it looks incredible. And what he's done is his website is about his book, but you would never actually know that it's about his book, meaning, or sorry, you do, but it's not the focus. So it's not like this book is so incredible, this book is so amazing, buy my book. Instead, he starts with a question, and the question is, if you could 10 times your per hour output, how would your life and business change? So right away, by presenting a question that is like a you question, it instantly gets me thinking about me, the consumer, and it also, like, if I read that and I'm like, oh, that would be great, you know, to have 10 times per hour my output, and that would change my life a lot. And oh yeah, you know, like, so then what happens is I'm no longer reading like the book. It doesn't say like this book will help you to be a better, you know, more productive human being. Because then I'm like, okay, great, that's nice. It's actually making me think about myself. It's making me think about the position that I'm in and whether or not like that would actually be beneficial to me. And he's taking a chance. He's taking a chance on like the fact that that might not be, if someone answers that question and they're like, it wouldn't actually change my life that much, then they're not going to probably buy the book. But that's okay. You don't want to be everything to everybody. You just want to focus in really clearly on the people that do need what you have. So by asking that question, anyone who says, yes, that would be great, is likely then going to read on and pick up his book. So in the blog post that I shared on my site that you can check out later, I have a number of examples of that. I have a number of examples of companies that just do it really, really well, that have really kind of honed in on that message and focused on the customer. So you can check that out later. Oh yeah, and what I was going to say is for your homework is go look at your website and then try to rewrite the copy so that it no longer focuses on what you do for people, but rather like what the benefit for them is, and write it as though they're reading it for themselves, like the if you could blah 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 versus let me help you blah blah blah, if that makes sense. Okay, the next thing that you want to do is you want to create opportunities for empathy. So one of the things that I highly recommend that organizations do is put their staff and anybody who's closely involved with the brand through the customer experience. So what that means is, so let's say you have a business and you're selling, I don't know, you're selling coffee mugs. What I would encourage you to do is pretend you're a customer and go through the experience of buying that coffee mug. And think to yourself as you're buying that coffee mug, like what was difficult? What might have, lost the sale? Where did I have an opportunity to maybe convince people that the coffee mug was really, really awesome and why it was awesome? And be critical. And then what I would also recommend is have your staff do the same thing. So if you do have staff or you've got a close knit team, or you've got like an assistant of some sort, or even a close colleague, have them go through the same thing. Have them go through the process of engaging with whatever it is that you've got and get their feedback. Have them tell you like where you might have, they might have lost you a little bit, or what they could have done a little differently to actually get you really excited about, whatever it is that you're selling. The next part is to listen. Oftentimes, I actually read a really great quote recently, and that was that we listen to respond versus listening to understand. And I think we even do this in our marketing and in our business operations. So oftentimes we're very reactive, and if somebody says something, we might react to that in the moment, but we're not really listening to understand and make a difference or make a change. We're just trying to respond to the feedback to eliminate that little moment versus thinking about it as a big picture thing. So what I encourage people to do all the time is just really take customer feedback seriously, validate your customers' opinions, champion their voice, and let them know that they're heard. When you do this and you're making changes that were requested by your audience and those kinds of things, you're going to give them stories to tell other people about the organization and about how they were, felt understood and heard, that then become really valuable. And those kinds of stories spread. The next piece is appealing to many but speaking to one. So I want you to, when you are crafting anything that you're crafting, I do want you to think about that ideal client. I want you to think about the person that particular message in that particular group, like we talked about. I want you to think about them. And if you even have an example of a real human being that that exists in that group for you, think about them when you write it. So anytime that I write my marketing materials or I write a Facebook post, I try to write it as though I'm writing to one person. So I think about the person in my mind that I would want to resonate, I would want the message to resonate with, and I honestly sit and I write it as though I'm writing it to them. And so that means that when I do that, it means that resonance is much higher, because now not only am I just writing some material, but I'm actually writing it to a human in a very conversational way. So it feels a lot more customized and engaged than it would if I was just writing to the masses. In fact, I encourage anyone who's writing anything to never write to the masses ever, unless it's like a press release. But even still, you could still think about one person and make that a little bit more human. Another way to figure out the stories that are important is to ask questions. So ask your target market lots of questions. Facebook and Twitter and social media is perfect for that. You can post up a thing to say like, hey, we're thinking about doing X, Y, Z. What are your thoughts? What do you think we could do to make it even better? Or you could say, you know, we know that what's really important to you this year is X. So how can we help you get there? And one of the things that I read in Gary V's blog post, if you're not familiar with Gary Vaynerchuk, he's a fantastic business owner / marketer. And he wrote something in his blog post the other day that was perfect. I'm just going to pull it up real quick. I shared the post on my Twitter. Here it is. Because it was just brilliant, and I need to read it. In fact, you all should probably just go read this post. The whole post is really great. Okay, so this piece, right, where is it? It's a question that he says, oh yeah, right here. So he says that when it comes to like sort of reaching out to people and asking them those questions and getting them, you know, engaged, he says that what works for him is to just sort of say like, you know, here's who I am, here's what I want to have happen. So what can I do to help make that happen? Or what can I do to help, you know, your life be easier, or like that kind of thing. And so once you start asking that question and putting the person at the forefront of your decisions and making them feel like your decisions are actually hinged on, you know, whatever it is that they say, it creates a much better opportunity and an experience for them to want to then invest, whether that's a purchase or investing time and energy and that kind of thing. But yeah, I'm going to post a link to this. When I send out the recording, I'm going to also send this out because it's 5 core values of business from Gary Vaynerchuk, and it's actually really good. So I'll include a link to that whole article. Okay, so what kind of stories do people want to hear? And the stories that people want to hear fall under a few categories, and this is just to get your creativity sparked. I want you to, you know, take these away and obviously come up with like your own ways to tell these stories. And maybe some of them aren't relevant to you, but these are some examples of stories that get people kind of emotionally connected. So the first one is your origins. So I started off this presentation by telling you that, you know, at the age of 6, I got a computer, and that sort of set me on the path of this like entrepreneur, CEO, you know, path. That's my origins. That's, you know, where that comes from. But answering questions like, what is your why? What are your passions? Why are you the leader? Meaning like, why wasn't it enough for you to just refer, you know, to somebody else already doing this? Why did you feel so called and compelled to create your own business or create your own blog or create your own, you know, whatever it might be? So those 3 questions are really valuable for people. It gives them a lot of insight into why it is that you do what you do and why they should care. And it also lets them, like I was saying earlier with the winemaker, it really lets them latch on to your passion, because passion is incredibly contagious. So if they can do that, then it's very easy for them to be influenced by your passion. So some of the examples of this that exist that I think most of us know is like Facebook was founded in a Harvard dorm room. You know, we've heard that story. They've made a movie about it. We know this to be true. And it is something that we can say like, oh yeah, that was great. Those kids, like, you know, fresh in school, like their brains were just like on fire, and they like made this perfect, you know, this awesome thing. And now look at it. Now they're superstars. So it's very much a success story that's grounded in something that's, you know, got a lot of heavy origins to it. Another thing to share is your challenges. So what makes you real, and how will you engage, and how can you relate? Oftentimes, if we go back to the whole idea of hiding our mess, oftentimes we don't share what's real because sharing what's real feels scary and vulnerable and open. And we're a little afraid sometimes that people aren't going to get it, you know? But the fact of the matter is that when you do share what's real, it gives people something to relate to. And maybe it's not even on the level of like what it is you're selling, but it could be a side angle that they're relating to. And that creates more humanism in the brand and in the business. And it really lets people start to say to themselves, like, oh, I can relate to this person. And, you know, I'm getting to know them and I like them, and now I can trust them a little bit more. So an example of this notion of relatability and sharing your challenges, Henry Ford's first company failed after just 2 years of operation. So before Ford was Ford, as we know it today, it was a failure. It did not work out. And you know, if we didn't have this story to tell, if Henry Ford didn't have this, like, I failed the first time, I got back up, I rose up and pushed through, the story would still be great. Success stories are fantastic, but it wouldn't be as fantastic, you know, if you didn't have this contrast of the challenge first. So never be afraid to share your challenges. You know, I think that they can really provide that contrast between, like, where you are now and where you were, or where you are now in the challenge and where you want to go, because then you can have people rally behind you to help you get there. Another thing that you can share is your losses. So when you share losses, you know, in business, when you share when things didn't quite work out how you were wanting them to work out, it actually endears your customers, it inspires people, and it humanizes the business. They no longer look at it just as like a transactional churning machine, but now they can look at it and go, oh, yeah, okay, you get it. Like, I'm going through that very thing right now, and you understand it. And oftentimes, like, I think we forget, like, we present the polished side, but we don't often present the side that says, like, hey, I understand you because I've been there, you know? Here's why you might want to invest in our charity, because maybe you were in a similar space at one point in time, and you can understand that. You know, maybe you suffered from the disease that our charity supports. Like, just, you know, different things. Like, you want to share the challenges and share the losses to create those moments of connection. Something I thought was really funny was Amazon was originally called Cadabra, until one of their lawyers called it cadaver, and then they changed it to Amazon. So even that, like, it's a loss, right? They had branding and a name, and they were all gung-ho and they were excited, and then one little thing caused them to have to course correct, and now it's a funny story. It's no longer like a, you know, I'm sure at the time it was like, oh my gosh, we have to change everything, this is terrible. But now it's something that's, like, humorous, and obviously they were successful. So testimonials are also great. So testimonials, and when you're telling the story of your clients, whether that's through a case study or, you know, stories about, like, the successes that you have in your business. If you're an organization, that could look like the stories of the families and the people that you're supporting and helping. This is really fantastic. This provides social proof for people. It's external validity. You're not saying yourself, like, oh, we're awesome. You're having other people say that you're awesome for you. And it also shortens the know, like, and trust timeline, which is really important. So Zappos is a really good example of sort of leveraging customer testimonials. And the best part is they don't even do it themselves. They are famous for creating the best customer experience, and their customers rave about it. So their customers will take that message, run with it, and share it with every single person under the sun, because they just provide such a fantastic opportunity, or a fantastic moment for their customers. Okay, so now we're moving into the last portion of the webinar, and I hope you're all still with me. This is being recorded, so if you find yourself kind of like feeling overwhelmed, don't worry about it. You're going to get the slides, you're going to get the recording, you're going to get the links that I mentioned, and as a fun little bonus, I'm also going to throw in a copy of my book, Destiny, a love story about marketing, storytelling, and a video game. I said that backwards, but anyway, you get the gist. That book is also fantastic because it dives into the entire marketing campaign around Destiny, and just really dissects it in such a way that you can make it applicable for your own business as well. So I'm going to throw that in as a little extra bonus. And but yeah, so this is like the last portion. This is content strategy. So this is like, so now you know the kind of the stories that are important, and now we're going to talk about the platforms through which you can share them. If you are finding yourself, after this is done, wanting to dive even deeper into the nuts and bolts and the how-to in terms of like how to share it on Facebook and how to share it on Instagram and that kind of thing. We're actually having a few other follow-up webinars to this. In the, let's see, I'm pulling up the dates real quick. So we're having one in June, or two in June. June will be Facebook and Instagram. So we're going to go like deep into that and really like, you know, get into the nuts and bolts of like how to craft those messages specifically, like how to design the things for Facebook and Instagram and that kind of thing. But anyway, so this is the final leg, and we're going to talk about a few different things. So stories work really well on websites when they come in the form of your web copy, your imagery, on-site video, interactive features, etc. So I have a couple of examples I want to show you. So Charity Water is a charity that supports developing countries with building wells and providing them with clean drinking water. And they've done a fantastic job on social media. In fact, like they killed it from day one. They've just been awesome. But what they do on their website is they have a section that talks about their water projects, and they call it stories. And you can read stories about, like, you know, the actual communities they've helped. You can watch videos. You can really become immersed in the actual support that this organization has given to these families in such a way that you just can't get anywhere else. Another great example, and I actually, I think that they're tuned into the webinar today, but Make-A-Wish, especially the one that's here in Eastern Ontario, they do a fantastic job with this, specifically at their gala. And if you get the opportunity to go in future, and you should, it's great. But they create such an immersive experience at that gala that the stories that they tell, the families that they introduce you to, the live wish granting, I mean, it's all just incredibly inspiring. And so finding a way to carry those moments and those experiences and those immersive opportunities onto your website will really help drive those stories and give people things to share, because everybody loves a feel-good story. Another example is this tool called Sprout. So Sprout is like it's sort of like an ultimate creative space. Like it's this kind of it's like a unique tablet-y computer thing, which I know I'm explaining this so well. But it's specifically made by HP, and they have this whole part on their website called the Creator Gallery. And what they do here is they show behind the scenes videos and images and illustrations and things of everything that was ever created and shared on their creative space. So what it does is it creates an opportunity for these individual creators to tell their story, but also for the brand to have these examples of how people are using the tool, what they're able to do with it, the results that they're experiencing. You know, it's a lot of social proof. And so if you can find a way to do this on your website, whether that's like some sort of a testimonials thing, or another good example, Danielle Laporte has a spot on her website where she's got like all these images of people who are reading her book, like that have Desire Map out, or the Truth Bomb decks, or whatever it might be. And so she uses that really well as well, in the sense of she's showing actual human beings consuming the thing, which just lets people know that, oh yeah, there are people who actually, you know, like this. And it's fantastic social proof. So anything you can do that illustrates that, gives behind the scenes, and gives people ideas in terms of even how to use your product and how it'll benefit their lives, perfect. Those are the kinds of stories you want to make sure that you're sharing often. Another platform that's obviously very valuable in telling stories is blogging. And blogging, I would actually argue, is probably one of the best places to tell stories. And the reason is because it's very journal, you know, it's very much like a journal-driven platform. You can use any of the ones I've mentioned here: WordPress, Medium, Tumblr, LinkedIn. But basically what you want to do on your blog is you want to just tell stories that your audience is going to resonate with. And a blog is beautiful because you can actually target multiple demographics without turning any one demographic off. So what I mean by that is, like, you could, like, I blog all the time. And if I look at like the latest, my last few blog posts, I'll just read you some of the subjects. So We've got 3 questions to ask yourself before adding a comment to a conversation. That one's more specifically focused on relationships and love. Then we've got tracking your brand and company mentions on social. That's obviously more marketing focused. We even have one key launch strategy that Destiny used to successfully launch House of Wolves. That's marketing, but it's also video game oriented. So again, like each of those will serve and service a different demographic. But because it's on a blog, it's not so targeted. It's not coming in via an email, like a mass email, and turning people off. If they don't want to read a post, they just scroll on past it and click the one that does resonate. So a blog is a really great avenue for that. And if you're not yet blogging, I would highly encourage you to start blogging. Here's something that I haven't shared yet publicly that is a really good tip. And so what I started to do, if you have a blog and you're stuck for, you know, the sort of stories that you should be telling or like what to talk about or that kind of thing, what I've started to do, and this won't work for all of you, this might just work for some of you, is go to like any of the job boards. So like go to LinkedIn jobs, or go to, you know, whatever job boards are available for you, and look at the jobs that are hiring in your industry. So like for me, I might look up like social media manager, or I might look up marketing communications manager, or whatever it might be. And then look at the requirements that they're asking for the people to have for the job, and then write blog posts and stories around those requirements. Now, you might be wondering why you would do that, but here's the thing. So clearly the companies that are big, particularly if there's like, you know, if we're looking at like what are the hiring requirements for a company like Apple, those companies like have honed in on what's important, right, to them and their brand and their marketing. And so if for me, because that's my niche, if I'm writing about those very specific things, it means that I'm going to be speaking in the most relevant terms possible for marketing professionals in, you know, in that sort of space. So it was something that I started to do, and it's been really helpful. And again, it won't work for all of you, but if you are stuck with in terms of like content to share, that's one way to sort of to dig that up. It's been really helpful for me. This is just an example of a blog that does this really well in terms of telling stories. So what they've done here, as you can see, is that they integrate a lot of, you know, like really good, a good headline. They're integrating imagery, but also like even in the copy, you can see that they're not talking about themselves. They're talking about the audience. So it's like, why are people hiring your product? This isn't what your business makes. Like they're talking very much like you, you know, and they're using emotion as well in terms of this like angry clients, disorganized team. So they're pulling it all together. A lot of emotion, a lot of speaking directly to the audience, and of course, giving them an opportunity to learn more beyond that particular blog post. Another example is this. So ModCloth is a clothing company, and I've used this as an example because I want to show you sometimes that telling the story doesn't always need to be your own story, or a story that even feels relevant. Meaning, ModCloth makes clothes or sells clothes, and in this blog post, they wrote a fashion report, and they pulled fashion from American Horror Story season 4. So ModCloth doesn't make the clothes for this particular thing. It's a side angle, but they do know their audience well enough to know that the people that buy ModCloth are likely in the same demographic of people who also love American Horror Story. So if they blog about American Horror Story, it brings those people in, and they are naturally going to be like, ooh, ModCloth, let's go check out the fashion. And oh, wow, this is perfect. So sometimes when we come up with the stories, you can also be telling the side stories. An example, I work with a company that sells fitness bags, and you know, we got together, we had a meeting, and they wanted to craft a series of emails that would go out to their list to sell the bags during their pre-order period. And, you know, so we crafted a few of the very typical, like, hey, our bag is out, it's ready for pre-order, come buy it. You know, like we had those emails. But I said to them, I said, all right, listen, instead of just hammering them with sales emails for like 2 or 3 weeks straight, or 4 weeks, I said, why don't we create some resourceful style emails that are really going to resonate with the audience, that they'll find useful, and then we'll make the bag sales secondary. So what we did was we had a couple of the sales emails, but then we also did things like we honed in on the fact that the one bag that they have out now is a backpack, and backpacks are great for adventures. And so I wrote emails that talked about like saying yes, and why saying yes is an incredible way to get more adventure in your life. And then we had another one that was like 10 great things to do this summer, like 10 great outdoor adventure things to do this summer. And we had a trail mix recipe, and just these different things that they could actually use, whether they wanted to buy a bag or not. But those kinds of like that content brings in a different demographic than who's already on our list, but also the same demographic that is likely to buy a backpack. So sometimes you have to think about that too. Like, what are the side stories? What are the side angles? And how can I make that relevant to my audience so that I'm not just shoving down the brand's message down their throat, but rather giving them something else to come in the door through, if that makes sense. So an email newsletter, as I was just talking about, that's really, it's obviously a great way to connect with your audience. When we were telling those stories about saying yes and building adventure and providing those resources, we did that through their email newsletter platform. It went out to people that have said, yes, I want to receive your messages, send me your stuff. And what's great about that is it feels very exclusive for that particular group. But it's also very effective because they've already said yes to you at some point, and they did want to stay in touch. They're usually the most receptive people. So you can deliver your newsletter through MailChimp, Aweber, Constant Contact, Infusionsoft, whatever tool you want. The key with that is to just like create a different story in your newsletter that they're not going to get everywhere else. You want it to feel like you're actually writing them a personal email, and that they feel really good about that. I had a funny moment this week. So when I emailed out about the webinar, or sorry, not the webinar, I emailed out this week about a service that we're doing, which is like we're writing tweets for companies. And so I wanted to make it really super easy. And so like for people to like jump in and, get this service done for them. And basically it's 100 tweets for $110. And when I emailed this out, I didn't want to just start with like, hey, we have a new service and it's awesome. So instead, I started the email out with a subject line that said, we need to talk about your social content. So right away, somebody's like thinking like, ooh, okay, why do we need to talk about that? And then I opened the email with, hi, and then the person's name. Don't worry, you aren't in trouble. And so like I ended up getting more emails back from people that said like, they were like, oh my gosh, I totally thought I was in trouble for real, which was fantastic. I wanted them to kind of have that heartbeat moment where they were like, oh, what do you mean? Because it is important. And I did want them to think about their social content, and I did want to talk to them about it. And, but finding that way of like creating that sort of moment where they're like, oh my gosh, what did I do? Is really fantastic. So Adobe does this really well. Adobe sends out pretty much like one email a year for this particular list. It's for the Digital Trends Report, and they just know their audience really, really well. They're consistent with it. They send it out every year. I just really love how they've done that. So it's a good example. And then so social media. Social media is obviously the biggest platform that we have to tell our stories. It's the one that's the most relevant. It's the most prevalent. It's everybody and their brother seems to be on social media. And oftentimes we're not using it very well. We're cross-posting one thing to 1,000 platforms, and I'm guilty of it too. And we're not crafting individual messages that really speak to those individual audiences. So the social media platforms that you could be on are listed there. And of course, there are lots of other platforms available. But I want to show you a few examples of companies that are doing it well. And then again, if you are in a space where you're like, I really want to learn the nuts and bolts, and I want to, learn more about the crafting process and the designing process and all that good stuff, you can always join us for the other webinars later this month, or next month, I should say. So Humans of New York is a Facebook page that has over 12 million likes. The way that this started was this guy got fired from his job and grabbed his digital SLR and hit the streets of New York to take pictures of people and share their stories. It exploded because people love hearing stories. They love seeing stories, especially ones that are about other humans. And he just really humanized the human experience, which obviously resonated with the audience. People love reading these. So they've done a really great job. If you're not already following them on Facebook, I'd recommend going to check it out. It's just beautiful. And he now has a book deal, or a book that's out about these stories. So worth checking out. This right here is an Instagram account that I love this example because it's for the website Design Sponge. But when you look at this, what I want you to notice is that she really has a mood for her Instagram. She's telling a story about who she is and what her content is about, even without you having to click in and read anything. It's very on brand. It's very design oriented. Everything is it's very well thought out. And it almost has similar color hues throughout. So one thing that I want you to consider there as well is that the story is not just about the text that you're sharing or the content, but sometimes it's about the overall as well. So sometimes taking a step back and looking at it from a big picture view like this is really valuable to make sure that the story you're telling is a consistent one. You can also use video and audio to tell really great stories. This is a fantastic platform because it really allows emotion to come through. When you can see somebody's face and their gestures and everything else, that makes a huge difference. I'm going to pop my own video back on here in a few minutes, but it's just really a different experience. So video and audio is fantastic. It doesn't need to be long video or even well-produced video. You can use something like Instagram video to do like a quickie one, or YouTube to do or even Vimeo to do a more high quality, longer version. But either way, the goal is to be doing video. So TED.com is an amazing website filled with amazing speeches and talks from all around the world. Their videos get shared and watched so much. And so I just think it's a great testament to the power of video. If you haven't already seen TED, I'd highly recommend checking that website out. And then, of course, the Old Spice guy. So if you remember this campaign when the Old Spice guy came out, this was probably single-handedly one of the best campaigns in the last 10 years because they nailed it. Last 5 years, they nailed it. They knew their demographic. They even appealed to the women, which it's not a product for women, but they appealed to women. By saying the man your man could smell like, it was funny. They got their audience and they just nailed it through video, and it was fantastic. And what was really super cool was at the time, they actually were reaching out to specific people on Twitter, myself included, and they were doing these custom videos where the guy would actually say your name in the video. And of course that was incredible too, right? You get this the Old Spice guy just said my name in a video. And anyway, so they just did a fantastic job, but they used video to tell the story of their brand, and then by proxy sell a lot more product. Virtual or live events are fantastic as well. As I already mentioned, the Make-A-Wish Gala does a fantastic job of telling stories at their live event. Virtual events are good as well. So if you can tell a brand story or tell your story through video or a webinar, that's also great. They just provide a little bit more depth and a little bit more opportunity for connection. So let's go back to the people before we're all done here. So I'm hoping by now you see that the sort of targeting each of the individual groups is important. Crafting messages that meet each of the different groups' needs is important. Crafting messages that line up with each of the platforms is important. And then, doing that over the course of a beautiful timeline versus waiting till your thing is launched, it's really important. And getting people excited, you want to start that process as soon as you possibly can. You don't want to start that when your thing is ready to go and is out. You want to release it into an already arms open and waiting audience, which is going to be a lot more powerful for your particular brand. So the questions I want you to start asking yourself after you leave here are, what are the stories that will resonate with your audience? What do you think that they care about? And maybe that's going to take some time to sit down and think about and plan and ask and ask. So if there's anything I can encourage you to do is don't assume, but actually ask. Post things to your Facebook that, you know, kind of inquire further and deeper. Post things like send an email survey out, whatever the case might be. Just make sure that you're asking those questions. And then I want you to also ask yourself, how can you begin that conversation from day one? You don't want to be starting that conversation on launch day. You want to do it much earlier. So how can you do that? How can you start that process? Remember, this model is broken. So throw that out. If you're still following that, don't do that again, and move into something that's a little bit more inclusive and open, and will spread your business's big ideas. So that's it for the content. I haven't seen any questions come through, but if there are questions, please feel free to email them, or, like I said, Facebook them, or whatever format works well for you. I'm going to pop my video back on again just to say hi, and so just give me 1 second to do that. I just got to click a couple buttons because I do want to say hello and goodbye in case you're still tuned in. Stop my screen sharing. Yay! Hi! So that's it for me and the content. So I really hope it was valuable. I hope you learned a lot about storytelling and branding. If you do go to my website, erinblaskie.com, I have a free e-course called Leading Your Business with Heart. You can get that on my homepage. The blog is there, and there's lots of free resources there on the blog as well. I've been trying to write a lot more about marketing and all that good stuff lately. And the thing that I always tell people is, if you have questions, please send them to me, because they make great blog posts for me. If I can turn a question into a post and share it, it's going to help not only just you, but it will help every single, anyone else who's sort of in a similar situation. So let me know. You can ask questions even after this is over. You can ask questions, at any point in time. But otherwise, I'm going to say goodbye and log off, and I'll follow up with you within the next 24 hours or so, or later today, with the recording, the links to those 2 blog posts I mentioned, the Destiny download, which I'm going to give all of you because that's awesome. And that's it. All right. So have a great day, everybody, and I'll see you all soon. Bye.